Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another social emotional workshop. Today, we will be dealing with the subject of coping and wellness skills. Welcome back, Christina and Joe. Thank you for joining us. We
Yeah,
can go ahead and get started.
thanks for having us back out again. So today we're definitely going to be spending a lot of time on coping skills. And just to kind of throw a disclaimer out there again, this is not meant to replace any mental health medicinal help, but it's meant to provide more holistic things you can do at home. And many of the skills we're going to talk about today are actually wellness strategies that become routine for us, but they can also be used in the moment as a coping skill for really difficult emotion. So, we're going to kind of just define what coping skills and wellness strategies are. We're going to identify a few different ones and determine when to use each type of one. And then I'm going to provide a plethora of resources, like I usually try to do. And you'll have those in the slides because I'll send them out after the presentation. You can click the live links. But what we're going to do is really focus on physical and emotional coping skills today, things we can kind of take action on ourselves. But there are 8 dimensions of wellness now. There were only 7 just 2 years ago. And we're adding 2, right? As we recognize more and more of our basic needs as humans, and as we progress in what we believe is a human right and what all people need to thrive. We are at just a massive expansion globally on this scale where public health is more important than it's really ever been. So we may even see more dimensions be added. But coping skills, they really do impact all areas of our health, and usually they impact more than one area at a time. And sometimes, even when it's not directly impacting all levels, you'll see trickle down effects where you're working on physical health and it improves your emotional health, or vice versa. Or you're working on a skill set and learning knowledge that improves your vocational and then your financial health. So they're really all just so interrelated. It's almost impossible to tease these dimensions of our health apart from one another. They're just so interrelated. But a coping skill, coping itself means to intentionally invest your time and your effort into improving a problem that you have. And it could be a personal problem, it could be interpersonal problems. And the goal of the action and intention that you're investing is to make it easier to deal with, to make it more tolerable for you to go through the stress, to go through the situation, to be around a person, whatever type of issue you might be having. And we kind of see that, Maslow's hierarchy of needs has been around since like the 40s. And again, we see it being added to. Reproduction wasn't originally on the basic need list down there at the bottom. And, property and other resources weren't always on the safety needs. So we kind of see ourselves adjusting these as our society has advanced yet again in wanting more people to have more resources, and recognizing that more of these things are really basic human needs than we ever thought that they were, because for hundreds of years, people didn't have these things. But why I threw it in there today is just to kind of point out that it is extremely difficult to be working on self-esteem and self-actualization if our basic needs are not met. If we don't have food, healthcare, shelter, it's really hard for our brains to focus on developing other areas. And really, you'll see if you're looking at many of the things on here, they directly correlate to one or more of the dimensions of health that we all have and we all need. So, coping skills are great to prevent illness and to promote our general wellness. And they become really ingrained in our routines where we don't really intentionally have to think about doing them as much. But that does take a very long time. And while we're developing happy, healthy routines throughout our lifespan, we're definitely going to be experiencing problems, dilemmas, situations, and intense emotions that accompany those. So it's great to have a couple of coping skills that you can go to to solve those problems in the moment and calm your state of mind. And I just love some of these cute little quotes, what we think about ourselves becomes kind of the way that we view the world through skewed lenses. And it impacts what we believe to be true about ourselves, about the world around us. So we're going to focus a lot on kind of turning to be either objective or positive about our outlook on life. And, this definitely is more about habits and kind of forming long-term processes throughout our lives. But I'm just a huge Covey fan, so I kind of threw it in there because I think it really relates to a lot of the other topics we're going to talk about today, particularly active listening, seeking first to understand the other person and then to be understood with our point of view. And many of the coping skills we're going to practice today are all about sharpening the saw, either physically pruning our bodies and improving ourselves there, or sharpening the saw on more emotional and mental levels, intellectual levels as well. And of course, just kind of beginning with the end in mind. A lot of us tackle life focusing on getting our basic needs met and self-actualizing like all at the same time. We kind of have really big long-term goals for our life. And sometimes that can overshadow the short-term things we need to do. And that's why it's really important to put sub-goals in when you're doing any type of goal setting. But we'll talk about that at the last session of our series is goal setting. Coping skills, they really are all about self-regulation and self-control, if you will. And when we are putting first things first, we know that those physiological needs have to be met before we can really tackle some of the other needs that we have. And if you are hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, it is almost impossible to have productive conversations with others. It's extremely difficult to regulate your own emotions if the basic needs of sleep and food and companionship are not met. So you always want to tackle those first if you're feeling those. And some of the ways we're going to talk about today, we're really going to focus on mindfulness, gratitude, and then physical and mental self-care. And we won't talk about it in detail today, but decluttering your mind and decluttering your space are also great coping skills. Just tackling, your junk drawer and cleaning it out can be really therapeutic. Reorganizing your living room furniture can be really therapeutic. And then self-talk and I statements and in mantras, what do you tell yourself in the mirror every morning? That's a really great coping skill. And of course, if it's an interpersonal issue, you have to work on communication skills. But we are really going to hone in on mindfulness, gratitude, and self-care today. And I just kind of wanted to tie in that developing coping skills, both for in the moment and for long-term habits, builds resiliency. And we've talked about resiliency a lot. And again, we're going to focus on positive outlooks, taking care of ourselves, and kind of solving problems today. But it's all about bounce back ability, adapting to the situation with healthy alternatives and growing from adversity rather than being torn down by it. We're going to jump into physical health, and it certainly looks a lot different this year and probably for many years to come, where, it's looking like and they're not even far enough apart, but we've all got our masks on and there's much smaller groups. But it doesn't mean that these types of activities aren't still possible for us to do. And jogging with a dog is just one of the best things you can do for yourself in the moment when you are not feeling well. Getting outside, getting the blood circulating through your body, getting fresh oxygen in. And then if you have a companion to take with you, it kind of adds an extra level of connection, even if it's an animal companion, maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's your kids. But getting outside and just walking around is amazing for us, both as a long-term habit, and then in the moment when you're like, I'm so stressed out, I'm going to lose it, go for a walk, and you'll notice your heart rate is improved, your breathing is improved, and it really goes a long way to help you. But some of the other things we need to tackle before we can work on, any type of emotional needs is really taking care of ourselves physically. And we know that anything we do in either realm is going to kind of affect the other. So if we're working on our fitness, we'll see our mental health improve. And if we're working on our mental health, we'll find that we have more energy and more interest in being physically active. But hydration, most of us walk around moderately dehydrated all the time. And a lot of it's just our lifestyle here in Northern America. We get really sedentary, and we tend to not drink enough water. We drink a lot of sugar, carbonated, caffeinated beverages. And a long while back when I was growing up, we were always told 8-ounce glasses was enough. But for real optimal hydration, we actually need a little more than that. So if you're below that, if you're like drinking a cup of water a day, 8 glasses is probably a perfect starter goal for you to kind of get up there and get your body used to drinking more water and notice huge differences in your mood. But if you're already hanging out around 8-ounce glasses, or you really don't have any idea, you're like, sometimes I'm drinking out of a mug, sometimes it's a water bottle, I can't really add up all these ounces and figure it out. Aiming for the 2.7 to 3.7 liters is going to be the optimal hydration level that you really want your bodies at. And for our teen audience, you'll see they're really not that far behind us. 2.3 liters to 3.3 liters. And for us adults, this is, for women, it's actually closer to like 10 cups a day is optimal hydration. So 8's okay, but 10 is going to make you feel a lot better. Men, they could easily have 15 cups of water a day before hitting that optimal hydration. So 8 really isn't going to be enough for them. They are not going to feel huge effects and differences until they get over the 10. And even our youth, whether it's male or female, especially if our students are still in sports, they're sweating through a lot of their hydration, and they may need much more than they're getting. And drinking water in the moment is also a great coping tool. Because if you've ever noticed kind of when you're taking a drink of any beverage, you actually kind of have to like hold your breath for a second, right? And you notice that it alters our breathing patterns, and then you're adding the hydration level on top. So it can be a good go-to skill to just be like, I'm gonna go drink a little bit of water and get a snack and calm myself down. Because hangry is a real thing. If you are hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, none of the other coping skills are going to work until you've coped with those things first. And it could be going and getting a snack. It could be moving your lunch hour up just 30 minutes earlier so that you get refueled, before it gets to the point of feeling really frustrated and feeling really hungry. Now, I threw this guy in here.
Christine, I want to add to that, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was thinking how many I drink. I only drink 3 or 4, maybe, sometimes more if, I'm doing a lot of presentations or something. But whenever there's like a conflict or 2 people at a workplace, they always pause for a glass of water. If you're in the hospital and you're excited, they offer you a glass of water.
They do.
That kind of goes on. There's like, hey, let's calm down. Let's get a glass of water. So that water, when you said you're drinking and your breathing changes, that just made so much sense to me.
Yeah, it's just such a small thing. I mean, and our brains do it without us thinking, and that's why. That happens way down here in the brainstem.
Mm-hmm.
Our brains know how to swallow and breathe and synchronize those, and we don't think about it. But just picking it up and putting it to our lips, it triggers the brain to go, yeah, we have to change our breathing so we can swallow. Yeah. And we don't consciously think of that. But the coping skill is the effort of, I've got to go get some water. I've got to go get a snack.
Yeah, I got a shot from the doctor. And I got a little wheezy from it. And what do? Have you drink a glass of water.
Yeah. Yeah. And even like if you're giving blood or something, they'll often offer like a sugary drink, but just sitting down and taking a drink of anything can kind of help your body go, oh yeah, we can recover from losing a pint of blood. We can recover from this. No big deal. And then they add, of course, like orange juice or something a little sugary to kind of get your blood glucose levels back up too. But just that principle of taking a drink can be so powerful for us and get us calm again and regulate our body.
Right now.
But 2,000 calories a day is a pretty good guideline for anyone over the age of 12. But I would just highly, highly recommend, once you get these slides, or if you want to just navigate there now on yourself, check out myplate.gov, because they have dietary prescription plans almost, right? Where you can go in and you can enter, I weigh this much, I'm this old, I'm what gender you are, if you've got any allergies or eating restrictions, and it will make you a diet plan and you can print them out. And also they make shopping lists where you can kind of go in and get like generic shopping lists and plan out your week well before you're ever cooking anything. And it's just so helpful to kind of track what you're eating and what your family's eating. But so many of us just don't get enough of our macro or micronutrients. So the macros are these big categories, and the micronutrients are the vitamins and minerals, the tiny, tiny little components that we're looking for in our foods. And particularly magnesium and potassium have been shown to greatly improve muscle resilience, so how fast our muscles recover from workouts, and also our mental health on focus, attention spans, and memory even as well. So getting your diet right can be a really good coping skill, both long-term as a routine in your life, but it's also a good idea if you're feeling really, angry or nervous. Think about, has it been 5 hours since my last meal? Maybe before I finish this conversation, I need to go ahead and take lunch. Especially at school and at work, if we miss those and then we have a really stressful meeting, after we've missed lunch, our responses are not going to be great. We're not at our peak selves to respond to a stressful meeting or a pop quiz that we didn't know was about to come right after our missed lunch. So it's just so important to kind of think about that and plan around that. And then activity. Again, mental health and physical health are impossible to tease apart. They impact each other so, so greatly. And, this one's from the CDC, and they also have on myplate.gov and on the CDC, they have where you can kind of do calculators and get a good plan for yourself for getting in exercise minutes. And they're not super specific. It's just anything that's moderate to intense aerobic activity. And it's just got to hit 150 minutes per week. And they do recommend starting really tiny and little 5-minute bursts. If you have been living a really sedentary lifestyle, 5-minute bursts a couple times a day, every day of the week, can dramatically change your mood. And in terms of affecting like blood pressure and weight loss, bursts of just 10 minutes over the course of 6 weeks are enough to impact that, lower your BP, lower your weight. And just 10 minutes is enough to really get that going and help you. And I kind of just love the graphics on here. Having a companion with you on your walk, be it, a friend, a spouse, your pet, is really, really powerful to build connection and get physical activity at the same time. And I also kind of love like just this little gardening one. Sometimes gardening can be barely a physical activity. You're just kind of, smoothing out soil in a small pot. But other times you are pushing wheelbarrows around for hours landscaping your yard. So it can be very vigorous activity, actually. So planning, how can I get work done and get my exercise in? I need to do this housework already, and I need to do this yard work already, but but how can I make sure that that kind of hits my physical activity goal too? It makes me feel good about working instead of like, it's just one more chore we got to do. And cultivating life from a seed, you know, we've all seen it in that 6-year-old who brings home their little Mother's Day plant that they planted like 3 weeks back, and they watched it grow. And it really does impact our psyche to feel like we've impacted and helped another specimen live. Even though the plant can't give us any affirmation, can't give us any love back, just the feeling of giving love and care to our plant is impactful. And that's not just for children. This impacts all of us. So having more green space in your home and cultivating that can also help as a coping skill. Another big one is sleep. And this, it also, just like water, it has huge misconceptions that's just, pushed further by our society. We're always hearing 8 hours is great, but 8 hours is not necessarily great for everyone. And especially, you teens, some of you might actually still need the 11 hours. And many of you by high school, might still be doing better at 9 or 10 hours. So knowing that and setting up our routines around it is really important. And I kind of wanted to mention napping as well, because napping can be dangerous as a coping skill, especially in the teen years, because it can turn into avoidance. So, taking a 20-minute nap could completely rejuvenate you and be a beautiful coping skill. But for some folks, they're really prone to oversleeping and turning to naps for avoidance. I think a lot of us have done it. I've got to write a 10-page paper and I just can't. I'm going to take a nap instead. And then we don't get back to the paper for a whole nother day. So if you're going to use napping as a coping mechanism, you need to make sure you've got some pretty strict limitations on it. So setting an alarm for only 20 or 30 minutes short nap, that's enough to really perk us back up. And, maybe you could go tell your mom or your husband or your roommate, please wake me up in 30 minutes. Don't let me avoid this paper all day, and ask for an accountability buddy if napping is going to be a go-to coping skill for you. Now we're going to kind of transition into mental health. And I'm sure you recognize this slide. It's so important. I put it in almost every presentation. And you'll see there's a lot of overlap because if we're working on one aspect of our health, it will impact the other aspects. All 8 dimensions are impacted when we alter one. But the 2 biggest emotions that we really need to cope with in the moment are typically anger and anxiety. So we're going to focus deeply on those today. And we're actually going to do a couple of techniques. I'm going to kind of get comfy myself too. But anger it's everywhere, right? We all feel it, and we all feel it nearly every day at some level. And the folks that really can get good at managing it and minimizing it, they tend to have very strong relationships, and relationships, again, further our ability to cope with conflict and issues that arise in our lives. And anger is not, it's not always a negative thing, right? We see this, you see someone's outburst on the outside, but we have no idea what else they're feeling inside. And it might not be that they're trying to be aggressive. It might not be, like a bad thing where they're trying to take control of the situation. It might be that they feel rejected, that they're drowning in their own childhood trauma. And all we see on the outside is the angry outburst and not the deeper emotions that might be fueling that. But a lot of the great ones that are constantly being recommended are deep breathing techniques in different patterns. There's another good one where you can kind of set up warning lights in your head or temperature gauges in your head. And it's a visualization technique where you just can imagine that getting flushed in the face. Maybe you're a hand clencher, maybe you're a jaw clencher. When you start feeling those, you can put on an imaginary light in your head that flashes and says, calm, calm. And, I've seen a lot of places put it in red, But I would recommend, if you're doing a visualization, do it in like blue or green. Visualize a blue light soothing your brain. Visualize a green light going forward into a calm response, so that we don't kind of re-trigger ourselves with anger. Counting is always a great one. I'm sure all of us heard before the age of 5, take a deep breath and count to 10. And we all just laughed at our mom and blew it off and thought, that's not good advice. What does mom know? But counting to 10 is transformational, and I dare you to give it a try. It really can help you. I statements. So these can be done in our heads as mantras for ourselves, but they can also be said when we're in an interpersonal conflict. I feel this way because, and avoid blaming the other person, of course, and saying you did this and you messed this up and you caused my anger. Say, I feel upset. I feel scared, overwhelmed, whatever the feeling is, and express yourself that way. And it can really help you feel better and feel heard, but it also will likely de-escalate the other person as well, because you're taking some of that ownership of the feeling onto yourself. Reframing and clarifying. So, if you're talking to yourself in your head, reframing it either as objective or more positive can be very helpful in calming yourself down, but clarifying if you're talking to another person. So I hear you say whatever you believe they're sharing with you, and is that right? And kind of clarify their message and seek first to understand and then to be understood. And this will validate the other person and de-escalate them. And you might even find that you don't disagree that much after all. Maybe they correct you and they say, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying this. And there might be less of a disagreement than you even think there is. This happens all the time, where we assume a person is thinking and behaving one way, but their intention is totally different. And we can usually come to some sort of agreement once we clarify that. But I would like to invite you all to just do a quick one round of this breathing technique with me. And go ahead and just get cozy in your chairs, feet flat on the floor if you can, and back nice and neutral. Shoulders down and back just slightly, and neck neutral. And I invite you to just kind of find your own natural breathing first. So kind of calm down and let your breath find a nice natural spot. And through your nose, inhale. 4, 3, 2. Hold it. 4, 3, 2. Exhale. 4, 3, 2. Hold. 4, 3, 2. Inhale. 4, 3, 2. Hold. 4, 3, 2. Exhale. 4, 3, 2. Hold. 4, 3, 2, 1. And this technique can be used as a meditation that you plan to do. Every Wednesday at 7, I'm going to meditate and do some deep breathing exercises. But more importantly, you can stop what you're doing when you're stressed out and do this immediately. And you can repeat this pattern until it works. So you can do 2 rounds. You can do, 20 rounds of this if that's what it takes to re-regulate your body and calm your nerves. And this is also a great technique for anxiety, but we're going to do a different one for anxiety. So if we're feeling stressed out, we're afraid, we're overwhelmed, there's lots of different forms of anxiety, and it occurs on a spectrum like we talked about earlier in the week, where a lot of our anxiety and stress is quite normal. And then when we're feeling it go past that and become more dangerous for us and more alarming to us, it's definitely time to reach out for medical help at that point. But so much of our anxiety is normal, and we are going to experience it. So it's important to kind of have some back pocket techniques that we can turn to. Deep breathing is great for both anxiety and anger. Progressive muscle relaxation is good for both, but really helpful for anxiety. And that one is, you can start at your head or start at your feet, but most traditional forms of this start at the feet. And that's just kind of aligning with the chakras and going up with them for different types of cultures and religions that believe in those. But what you do is you clench and relax each muscle group, starting from like the feet and the base, your calves, and then come all the way up through the shoulders, through the head. And in some religions and cultures, they actually envision like a sphere of that negative energy exiting through the head. And so you're kind of clenching and then really relaxing each muscle group, and then envisioning that that stress is leaving your body. And it's just so helpful. And it can be used for anger as well. But typically, anger needs a little bit more in the moment fix, where progressive muscle relaxation is a little bit better for anxiety and fear and stress.
Christina,
Reframing, yes?
how long do you hold the tension before you relax in that progressive muscle?
Just a couple of seconds is really enough. I have heard a lot of, sorry, my kids are going a little crazy back there. But I have heard wide varieties. Have you heard any specifics, Joe?
Well, I heard 30 seconds in some, but then, like you said, some quick ones just tighten and then release. And sometimes I heard 30 seconds, you hold it tight and then release and feel that the difference between the tightness and then the relaxation.
Yeah, I've just heard such a wide variety, like you said, anywhere from just a few seconds to like 30 and 45 seconds. And I think that you should practice with that and see what your body responds to the best. You might find that just 5 seconds is enough, especially once you're practicing this all the time. Sorry.
Yeah, because 30 seconds seems like a long time just to sit there with the tightness.
Yeah. I typically do not do that myself because I do practice this one. And I will sit in the release of the muscle longer than in the tightness of it. And kind of intentionally try to stay as released as possible. And you might even see it you probably see it in the way I sit, especially when I'm presenting and maybe I'm a little more stage fright, but a lot of us sit like this because we're chronically stressed and we're holding the stress right here. So I really do try to sit in the relaxedness of the pose longer than in the clenched part of the pose myself. But I am so sorry, friends. My kiddos are having a harder day than they typically do. Apologize.
No problem.
That's okay. No problem.
We can get through that and ignore those.
Absolutely.
Reframe it, right? They are just living their lives, right? They are trying to explore their own emotions. So we have to take our thoughts and either pull ourselves objectively away from them and say, yes, this is happening, and not put any emotion on it at all, or try to spin it and find, one or two good things that happened about the event. Is there a silver lining to this event? Can something good happen? So I'm hoping, like from their little sibling fight they're having right now, that their bond will actually grow stronger because someone's going to apologize, is kind of my hope. And that's the silver lining of my tough situation. But this happens all the time. Like every hour, we might come across some new situation that triggers us in a certain way. And if we can step back from it and think, what good can come of this? We often will feel a lot better about it. And of course, if it's an interpersonal issue, if the anxiety is surrounding a person or a set of circumstances that you have to communicate with other people in, talking through that can be very helpful. So it's important to find someone that you trust to talk that through with, because it's difficult to push through anxiety by talking to someone you don't know or don't trust. You're very unlikely to open up. So it's important to kind of have one or two people that are your go-to, that you are going to go share this with when you're feeling this way. And then we can kind of do just a real quick grounding technique. And this can be really helpful when you're starting to feel the quickness of the heart. You might be fist clenching, you might be teeth clenching, could be whole body, right? Your whole body can be kind of pinned up like this. You might be shaking. And the most common is shortness of breath and rapid heart rate for feeling an anxiety attack. And when we feel this coming on to us, what we're going to do is we're just going to pause, and we're not going to even look inward. We're just going to look at our immediate environment, because quite often our anxiety is about something happening later in another setting. So we're just going to pull our mind back, and we're going to look around our room or look around our yard, wherever we're sitting. And we're going to find 5 things that we can see. The first 5 that really grab your attention. And study them for a second. You know, I've got a vase on my dresser, and the flowers really just look amazing today. And kind of pull into that. And then 4 things you can hear. And they don't have to be good. They don't have to be bad. Just 4 things you notice in your environment. Maybe have a fan on in the room. Maybe your kids are also screaming. Whatever it is in your immediate environment, kind of hone in on it. And then we're going to look at 3 things we can touch. I've got a fuzzy sweater on. What do you feel on your skin? I've got a wood desk that's got a really great grain on it that you can feel. And just sit in the tactile feeling of that for a second. And then we're going to think about 2 things we can smell. Could be a room freshener, could be your own lotion or perfume. Maybe you've got food sitting on your desk. What do you smell? And then if you can taste anything, take note. You know, what tastes are maybe lingering in your mouth from your last meal or your last cup of coffee? What do you taste? And you can see that this can go very quickly, actually. There's really no set amount of time that this practice takes, but you're doing a few things. You're enacting every one of your senses in the now. What is really happening to me right now? And then you're also tricking your brain into counting how many things and going, all right, do I have the right amount of things? And that distracts you from the repetitive thought cycle of, I'm going to fail at that. It's going to be dangerous. It's going to be bad. And whatever repetitive cycles might be happening, you're pausing them and distracting your brain by every one of your senses is going to be flooding your brain with input. And you're going to be kind of counting, oh, is that 5 I see, 4 I see? And as you get good at this, you might not even need to count them. You can do this walking outside. You can do this sitting quietly in your room. But you're focusing on the now. What is in my environment right now? And you'll often find that your immediate environment isn't as scary as it seemed. You're going for a walk, and yeah, there was a scary dog back there, but now I'm looking at flowers and squirrels, and I'm safe. I'm good now. And you'll see that a lot of these fit into what we kind of think of as mindfulness, right? And mindfulness is not necessarily self-improvement. What it is self-awareness. You know, what is true about myself and my perceptions of myself? And then using that to fuel self-love. I like this about myself. So it's taking stock of, you know, what is real? What is actually happening in my life and in my personality? And then learning to love what you find there, no matter how ugly it is. So it's important that when we're practicing some of these to try to withhold judgment and those negative self-talk cycles. We want to kind of hold ourselves in our mind, but we don't want to hold ourselves in a jail where we're just beating ourselves up in our mind. We want to hold ourselves in the mind objectively or positively. Either option is good, but negatively is not a good option. That is the opposite. It'll cause more anxiety. So you might find doubts and other underlying feelings happening. And what you want to try to train your brain to do is just observe them as this is happening. I am having a thought, but not really thinking of the thought as necessarily bad or good. And then, it often will lead to you being able to self-improve and self-actualize, but it's not the intention. The intention really is to just become aware of yourself and to love what you find there. And then you'll notice deep breathing was on both the lists for anxiety and anger, and indeed is told to us by all of our mothers, right, before we're even in kindergarten. So why is deep breathing so important? Why is everyone talking about it? And as you can see here, it's because it improves so many different areas of our physical and mental health all at one time. And it does this through a few pathways, but the biggest one is that you're bringing in oxygen. And the extra oxygenation can reduce the acidity in your blood and indeed prep you to adjust your hormonal level. So it's just so good to take deep breaths. And I really encourage you to do this both in a routine way, where you kind of plan, a couple days a week, I'm going to do meditating or some deep breathing. And then doing it in the moment when you're really about to lose your anger, or you're really anxious and you're not sure what to do, you're just scared, turn back to deep breathing. If none of the other techniques work for you, deep breathing probably will. And I'm not even going to read all of these, but you can really see it can help us with weight loss. It can help us with sleeping. It can help us just release toxins from our body that we're holding in from not getting in enough oxygen. It's very, very good for us.
Can I add something here, Christina?
Yeah, jump it. You want me to go ahead?
With the mindfulness and the deep breathing and some of these things and the meditation, I really struggle with that. Like when I can't meditate, I always wanted to, and a lot of these things I want to do, and I try to do them, and I don't think I'm doing them correctly. But what I read, it's helpful whether you think it's working or not. It's almost like working out. Like if you hated working out and curling and working out with weights like this, you can hate doing arm curls. And you can say, I hate, this is stupid, this is ridiculous, I hate doing it. But if you do it, your muscle is going to increase.
Yeah,
So
it
like
accumulates over time.
Yeah, so whether it's you don't like it or you don't think you're doing it right, when you participate in this, 5-10 minutes a day and things like that, it does have improvements in your body. Whether you're doing it right or you hate doing it, it will change your physiology and your
Yeah, absolutely. And most of that's happening just with the extra oxygen, because it allows you to reduce the acidity in the blood, which impacts all of our homeostasis, right? So like our temperature regulation, our jitters, all of that's impacted by just getting oxygen in. So it's just so helpful, and it does accumulate over time. And we'll get to that point you brought up, Joe. I think it's just so important because I also struggle with meditation, even though I'm like a meditation fan. I often find myself judging myself for it, right? We become anxious about being an anxious person. We become, we tell ourselves that we're bad at it and that it's not going to help. And that is the first thought we need to overcome. It's putting first things first. You're judging yourself already in the practice, and that becomes another negative self-thought that's cycling. So you got to shut that guy down first and then address whatever you really needed to do the meditation for. And a couple of different meditations that I think are really helpful because, a lot of times we think about meditation as clearing all thoughts from the mind, and that is not the case. It is indeed impossible to clear all thoughts from your mind. What meditation really is about self-awareness of what thoughts are there and kind of trying to slow them down. We're not erasing them, we're slowing them and examining them. And what I love about guided imagery is that it has another person guiding us through it. So it is very much so a type of meditation that's delivered by another person usually. Could be an expert, could be a friend where you just tell them, hey, walk me through a nature scene. But now in the world we live in, we have apps, and YouTube is just full of thousands and thousands of these, where you can go look up ones that you think might work for you and test them out and try a new one if it doesn't work and try a new one if it doesn't work, because we just have unlimited amounts of these at our fingertips with YouTube being out there in the world. But what it is it is a type of imagining a scene and taking ourselves outside of our now and our present moment and putting us in another scene that is soothing to us and that reconnects us with nature and our own mind imaginarily, right? So we just envision ourselves on a beach with a calming wave coming. We envision ourselves walking through a forest and listening to birds. So it's very, very helpful, and it doesn't take any type of mastery or great practice to do it because you're being guided by another person's voice. So it's a really great one. And kind of very similar to this is visualization techniques. And this one is where you're guiding yourself. So there's usually not another person involved or a guide walking you through it. It's all in your head typically. And all this one is envisioning yourself in the situation succeeding, or envisioning yourself reaching a goal successfully. So if you're really nervous about tryouts at school, envision yourself at that basketball tryout, just shooting hoops like nobody's business. Envision yourself, smell what that gym smells like. Feel the coach coming and patting your back, and you can actually feel like just that clap on your back. And really try to take all 5 senses in imagining yourself succeeding. And this type of meditation requires, absolutely no practice, right? Because as long as you can picture yourself successful, you can do this. And it is hard because quite often our brain will go, no, you're going to miss that layup. And we just have to calm our brain and say, I made it this time. And this time I made it. I made all of those baskets. This time, all of my drills were perfect. This time, the coach pats me on the back. And just keep taking your brain away from whatever negative failures it might try to throw at you. There are just hundreds of other ways that we can draw our attention to our own inner worlds, and many of them are very effective. I do quite a few of these, and I think a lot of us might dabble in many of these sections, and that's perfectly okay. You can pick one that works for you and do it every time, every day, every week. Or you can kind of try a few different ones or mix up various forms of these, and they're all going to be effective. As long as we're looking in and we're turning it either objectively or positively, we're going to see big amounts of differences in our view. And, it can be journaling, coloring, especially like the really detailed adult coloring books. It makes our mind focus in on these tiny little spots and alter them and color them, and it's very soothing. Mind mapping, lists, Venn diagrams. And I would just kind of add, avoid doing like a planning or goal setting session inside of the mindfulness session. Try to separate them if you can. So when you're making like your lists and Venn diagrams, let your mind flow freely for your mindfulness session. Like, don't just write down whatever pops out of your head, and don't judge it or try to over categorize it. Take maybe an hour or a whole day later and then look at what you've journaled in your Venn diagrams or in your lists and make a planning session from there, where you make another Venn diagram and you're like, well, that was kind of I don't know what I was thinking. Let's change it and separate those planning sessions from mindfulness sessions. But all of, go ahead.
Question with regards to the coloring. I've colored before, but it was not for the purpose of being mindful. How would I then, make it a mindful?
Yeah, and I do that too, because sometimes I'll get caught up in what colors match, or did I go outside of the line because my cat jumped on me, or sometimes we get caught up in those thoughts and it doesn't end up being very mindful.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would recommend doing is involving all of your senses.
Okay.
Does your coloring book, especially a new book, right? It's got like a new book smell, and allow yourself to get lost in that. The weight of your pen or your pencil. Are you using like gel pens that glide and you can kind of feel that glide across the paper? Or are you doing intricate shading with colored pencils? And kind of take note of the difference in the feeling of the tactile feeling of holding that pencil. And be aware of those senses that are coming in. Of course, there's vibrant colors, so that's obviously engaging like our eyes, but really take note of like tactile things and smells as well, and kind of draw yourself back in. And then kind of like the meditation techniques. So it's not about not thinking while you're coloring. It's about observing what thoughts might come up while you're coloring. Where is your mind wandering to while you're coloring? Are you thinking about just the page in front of you? Or are you starting to worry about school? Are you starting to worry about work? And don't judge those thoughts like it's bad to worry about work. Go, oh, I'm worrying about work again. Interesting. And just observe the thought and allow it to be, because it's not good or bad. It's just your thought, and all of your thoughts are valid. You can't act on all of them, but you're allowed to think it. And it is your thought, and to just be aware of it while you're coloring can be really rewarding.
Once that thought comes in, just focus back on the smell of the crayons that you're using, or the textile stuff you're talking about. So when those thoughts do come in, just go back to those things of the 5 senses that Christina talked about.
Okay.
Yeah, and scent is the most highly correlated with memory. So especially for like children who have a lot of trauma, the smell of that could trigger different things. So kind of regrounding and helping them to reground in what does it smell like now can be really helpful too. Smell is the most highly correlated with our memory of all of our senses. And then of course, all of the arts. So the arts are just amazing. And I encourage you to try to incorporate these into routines and just things you do, like once a week, I'm going to read or write poetry. Maybe you're working on a bunch of raps and you're trying to get an EP out. Set aside time. I'm going to work on my songs during this time. But it can also be a great go-to coping skill. So, it can teeter on avoidance again, where maybe we end up in our room just listening to songs for 4 hours in a row. And that might be a worry sign. But it's great to just kind of say, can I talk to you in 10 minutes? And then go sing your favorite song, alone in your bathroom, and reground yourself and kind of listen to an upbeat song. Maybe the conversation you're about to have is going to be really down. Go pick a song that's kind of the opposite and get your spirits lifted before you go back into the conversation. So all of the arts, theater, fine arts for sure. If you're painting with watercolor, same thing, the tactile. What does it feel like to swipe across that beautiful canvas? What does the texture of all of this feel like? And it can be very, very profoundly helpful for us. And then anytime that we're out in nature, especially if we're physically active. So even just walking really gets the blood flowing, it gets our endorphins up, and it can make us feel great. But while we're out there, again, kind of taking note of what thoughts pop up, but then kind of redirecting our thought to, what does the flower smell like? Do I feel a breeze? What do the birds sound like nearby? And kind of letting our mind focus on the direct natural environment instead of our worries can be really helpful too. Joe, did you want to add anything in there?
No, just what I already shared with that. I'm good.
Yeah, perfect. And then gratitude is probably the most widely studied in the Western world, right? So meditation has been around in almost every culture for thousands of years. But for a long period of time, especially here in the US, it just wasn't really thought of as medicine. It was, oh, that's the Eastern mumbo jumbo. We're not going to study it. But now, in the past like decade or so, we really have been studying it and finding that it works. And gratitude is one that's been studied pretty heavily. And I've got an article on the resource page about it. But there have been various studies done where, participants are asked to either write objectively or write positively. And then like the control group is told, don't think at all about it. Just write whatever comes to mind. And then there might even be a group that's told, write about only the bad stuff that happened to you. And we kind of look at the responses and kind of what comes out. But also they're given like a happiness index where they self-report, okay, do you feel happier after 2 weeks of journaling negatively? Do you feel happy after 2 weeks of journaling positively? And there was even some increases in the folks who just journaled and didn't think about it. Like they just journaled what happened to them, good and bad. And those people saw some results. But the folks who wrote down things that they were grateful for and happy for that they had in their lives, they saw big jumps in their happiness indexes. Joe, did you remember any more on that study that we were looking for on gratitude?
On mute. Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, no, I didn't find any of that study, that Harvard study, but the book, A Man's Search for Meaning by Frankl, what's his name? Frankl, a psychologist that was in the concentration camps in the Holocaust. And he talked about gratitude of why do some people kind of make it through adversity and why do some people not make it through adversity. And he talked about, being grateful and having a purpose in life that got people to get through. So they did a lot of studies to find out the people who made it through maybe a natural disaster or a home fire, what made them get through those barriers rather than some people that are stuck into that pain and suffering.
Yeah.
It was being grateful for what they have left. The people who don't make it through, they focus on what they lost, and the people that do make it through focus on what they have left. At least I'm grateful that this picture didn't burn in the fire.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a great point. Human suffering is relative. A lot of us feel like this is the worst day of our lives, but we're not experiencing war and famine or a house fire because the brain reacts the same way to these different levels, fight, flight, or freeze. And it can be outright, you're a refugee running from war, or it could be you're a stressed out student trying to avoid a test. And our brain has very similar response pathways that it follows for either one of those, whatever spectrum you're on. Our brain reacts to that sadness and suffering on very similar levels. So this is helpful for everyone. And you're kind of like, when and where and how do I use these techniques we've been talking about, Ms. Christina? And, I've tried it and it doesn't work. You can do all the breathing in the world and it is not going to impact how others behave. It is not going to impact how others react to you. And it certainly won't put more toilet paper on the store shelf. But what it will do, what it does work on, is your reaction to those stressors. What makes you cope? What makes you deal with the situation and survive it? And all of these techniques can help you do that, can help you let go of these things you can't control and focus in on making positive action on the things you can control. And view the things you can't control in a little bit more positive light. Find the silver lining. What are you grateful for about that? One good thing that happened. And we can always work on our attitude. We can always, limit the negative stimuli that we get. We can't always avoid work or school, but we can certainly turn the news off for a little bit. When we find ourselves getting really worked up about a situation, it's okay to pause it and you can always come back to it later. That's kind of the beautiful thing about technology. You know, when I was a kid, you really couldn't pause TV. You might actually miss the news if you paused it. But now you can absolutely go, nope, I'm turning that off. And it's not avoidance if you do plan to come back and say, yeah, I really want to work on activism and I want to make a difference in, say, Black Lives Matter. But you might find yourself really stressed out because it is devastating what is happening. And it is anger and anxiety inducing. So you might need to hit pause and say, I'm going to work on this later. Now I'm going to do my breathing technique. Now I'm going to color this instead. I'm going to journal how I'm feeling about this activism thing. I'm going to go get a snack and a glass of water and see if I can have that conversation with this person in a little bit of a better light. So focus on things you can control. And kind of, I would say almost all of these are good in either situation. But if you're feeling a lot of anger and anxiety and emotional based issues that are all internal, taking kind of the physical, I'm going to meditate, I'm going to take a bath, I'm going to go exercise, I'm going to talk to myself positively with I statements and mantras. You know, something that's going to make you feel more emotionally stable at the moment. And sometimes the problem focused are things that are external. They might be out of our locus of control, or they could be interpersonal relationships where two people are going to have to work on them together and collaborate. So you might want to make more intellectual based decisions on this and take actions on making a list, you know, setting boundaries and time limits on who I'm going to interact with when, how I'm going to allow them to impact my day. Especially this is so true right now when we're all working from our bedrooms, our kitchen tables, our living rooms, our slightly finished basements, right? Like we are all over the place and adapting our environment and adapting our schedules constantly this entire year and probably for another year more if not longer. So working on the time management and healthy boundaries is going to be really important. And you might want to do that with a lot more of the intellectual things like Venn diagrams, lists, and reaching out to others. And I'd say sometimes our emotions also need us to reach out to others. So asking for support is a good go-to for either of these types of issues you might be coming up with. So teens, we know teens are experiencing this at a little bit of a higher rate than most of us adults, you know, just because they're going through a period of time where their hormones are changing, their bodies are changing, they're coming of age, and there's a lot of societal views on what coming of age should look like. And that is very confusing. And then we throw in 2020 on top of all of that, and everything is just unpredictable. And they do feel genuine loss for things like, you know, I'm transitioning from 8th grade to 9th grade, but I didn't even go get to have like a tour of the high school yet. I've never seen the inside of my high school. And of course, for all of you seniors, like my heart just goes out to you that you are missing out on a graduation. And I think a lot of us, especially in this setting where, you know, maybe we thought we wouldn't graduate and then we get to our new school and we're doing great and they told us we're going to graduate, and you've been visualizing yourself walking across that stage, holding that diploma and shaking your principal's hand. And it's okay to acknowledge that that is a real loss. What's more dangerous is to dwell on it and get angry about it and to blame others for the issue. That's kind of dangerous. But acknowledging that losing graduation has impacted your emotions is completely healthy and normal. And it is a loss that you need to process. So kind of just to sum it up, you know, we can do these different self-care techniques really at any time. A lot of them can be done in the moment, they can be done in public, and certainly they can be planned into our routines, especially around sleeping and eating. These can profoundly become the way that our routine, our lifestyle will change when we start making these tiny changes. And you really have to work on the basic human needs first. So making sure you're eating and sleeping first is going to be really important. So if you jump into like, I'm going to start meditating and journaling, but you're not eating enough food, not drinking enough water, not getting enough nutrients, not getting enough sleep, it might not be very impactful. You'll want to kind of do those first things first. Get the food right, get the sleep right, and then kind of trickle in journaling, meditating, spa days, bath. And this is not selfish behavior. This is attending to your basic human needs. So it's not selfish to do self-care. And I think that's a big issue that is perpetuated in our society, especially for young men. You know, they're told that they shouldn't even be spending a lot of time on their hygiene, or they need to man up and do these things. And it's kind of damaging to our youth. So we really want to focus on self-care. And we want to focus on having good, healthy people around us. And of course, that doesn't mean avoid negative people. In that way, it means setting a healthy boundary between them. We can't always escape family members, especially in the teen years, where we don't always have a lot of say in who we spend time with. You know, it's mom's custody day, it's dad's custody day, and I just got to go with it. You know, you might, and that I'm so sorry. But reframing that and reaching out to positive people can really help you get through those situations. Focus only on what you can control. We cannot control others. All the deep breathing in the world will not make them respond to us better. How we communicate with them and listen first, seeking to understand before being understood, might change the way that they react to us. But there's no guarantee. So focus only on what you can control. And then just invest in yourself, you know, learn a new skill, pick up a new hobby. And you guys really are kind of lucky in that you have the internet at your fingertips. You can get into new hobbies and activities a lot faster these days, and it can be a lot of fun. And then parents and teachers, what can you do to kind of support teens in doing this? Continue to provide complete and healthy meals for them. Continue to try to keep them on a routine. And you want to do this while slowly giving them a little bit more authority and autonomy over themselves, but provide that structure still, and provide the foods that they do need. Yeah, they love Pop-Tarts, but also make sure they've got a balance of other healthy, nutritious produce in the fridge to choose from as well. Always establish rules and expectations, involve them in the process, especially with our teens. They can have an input on this, and then clearly set out what the consequences are going to be if they break that rule. Try to discipline over punishing. Always be willing to listen to what they have to say, seeking first to be understanding what they're saying, and then kind of say, well, I hear you, and explaining why maybe you couldn't change your mind. You know, the rule can't change because, but listening to what they have to say before you shut them down completely. Like, just let them get it off their chest. If you don't know the answer, be honest about that. Don't try to lie or avoid the conversation. Say, I don't know, let's go look it up together. And this is another big one that our society, I think, perpetuates with like toxic masculinity. You know, saying the words "I love you" is so important to your kids, and they need to hear it from both parents. If both parents are around, they should both be saying how much they care. And we all do have different love languages. You know, your teen might not be getting as many high fives and fist bumps as they used to going to soccer. So maybe incorporate a little more like physical touch. Do they want hugs? If they don't want hugs, do they want some high fives? Like, great job. You know, do they want words of affirmation? Do they need to hear "I love you" more? And everyone is different and responds differently, but let them know that you care in the way that they receive it best, not necessarily the way that you like to give it best. We do still need to help them understand, research, cope. We want to give them more authority to do it themselves, but they still need some support. And teens, you know, you're listening to this, ask for that if you need it. Say, you know, Mom, I still need your support on this. Can you do it? And fully develop out your statements and remind your parents that you love them too, whenever you can. always be grateful and practice self-care, and you want to do it in front of them. You want to role model that behavior as this is how I cope with stress, and this is how I'm coping with COVID-19. And that modeling can help them develop better habits as well. In teens, you are probably the bigger role model for your younger siblings, right? So when you can do it, your younger siblings are watching you. Are you journaling? Are you listening to music? Are you going for long walks? And they watch you cope, and they can learn those skills from you. And then if we can be grateful towards our family members, you know, tell your son if you've noticed he went and emptied the dishwasher and took out the trash without being asked. Tell him you noticed it and you appreciate it. Maybe your daughter ran and picked up the younger kids from school 3 days this week. And you're like, man, I really appreciate you taking the time out of hanging out with your friends or doing your own homework to go help out with your siblings. And thank her for that. You know, I noticed you did it and I appreciate you doing it. And how are we on time? Way over. Oh my gosh. Joe, I wish you had stopped me. Did everybody need to hop off? Please feel free to hop off if you need to hop off. Susan's like, yeah, you go over time. But I'm going to share these slides with you after, because I have a ton of resource pages. I'm just going to look through them really quick so you can kind of see them. But I've got a page here that has videos, if you like the meditation videos, and a page that has apps, especially I know you teens like to do your gratefulness and gratitude on apps. These are all good ones. Headspace, I love. Super Better is pretty good as well. The other ones I haven't personally tried. And then if you'd like to read about it in articles, it's there. If you need to reach out for help, here are the phone numbers. Awesome. So sorry, I got over time trying to hide all those toolbars on my Zoom. No questions in the chat? Okay.
I have a quick, well, I don't know if it's a question or a comment. I know that this seminar is geared towards teens, and I understand that, but the whole sleep thing, there is no way my body will let me sleep 8 hours a day. At 6 hours, after 6 hours of sleep, I start getting bizarre dreams, and they're actually usually bad dreams. So I wake up in a fit. So for me, 8 hours of sleep is unreasonable.
It's too much. Yeah, I know they're doing a lot more studies on this. For so long, they just kind of said 8 hours for everyone is good. And we're kind of only now really studying that deeper. I've definitely read some things on adults and seniors, particularly 5 and 6 hours is more than enough for some folks, especially in older adulthood, middle-aged through the senior years. So it definitely changes over time. You know, we need more when we're babies. We need quite a bit during early childhood, and it just slowly declines from there. We don't need as much as we age. So it's great just knowing yourself like that, Shirley, right? And that's what all of this is about, learning your own body's rhythms and listening to your body when it's telling you these things. I need to eat, I need to sleep. So listening to that.
For sure. Yeah. And I also know that a nap for me, and it's usually only 30 minutes, is the best part of my day.
Yeah, I have seen some pretty interesting stuff on 20 and 30-minute naps. Really short naps can help us power back through the day. And I saw one study on, it was an 8-ounce serving of standard coffee. So they were having like 90 milligrams of caffeine, maybe 100. Right before they took the nap, because it actually takes us about 20-25 minutes to really process the caffeine. So they would drink it and kind of rest and then wake up and the caffeine would just be hitting them. And they published an entire study about this. It was really interesting. I heard about that, gosh, back in college, but I thought that was just the most fascinating thing. I was like, I need to start drinking coffee and then nap.
That is interesting. It's almost like an internal alarm clock.
Yeah, right. As soon as it's really fully hitting the bloodstream, your alarm's going off.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for hanging out after time. I'm going to do better next week. And please always just pop off. You'll get the slides and you'll get the recording after. So don't worry about leaving if I've gone too long.
You did very well, Christine, as usual. Anybody have questions before we go? Comments? You're very welcome.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Goodbye, you guys. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.
Thank you.